Russia is utterly humiliated in all this. But you know why they had to let him in? They had to send a signal to the other dictators that they prop up. Push comes to shove, we'll at least give you a retirement home.
Syrians are waiting to see what comes next following the fall of President Bashar al-Assad's regime over the weekend. Today, the White Helmets, a Syrian civil defense group, have begun searching prominent prisons in the country for inmates that have long been detained by Assad. And yesterday, rebel forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, a proscribed terrorist group and former al-Qaeda affiliate, overthrew the leader, ending a 13-year-long civil war. Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, told Times Radio Breakfast that the government could look into removing the terror status of HTS.
You're right that they're a proscribed group at the moment. Some people have said that should be looked at again in the light of them taking over Syria. If that is what this settles down to be, we can look at that and we can consider that. But I can't tell you what the outcome of that would be at this stage.
Well, elsewhere, the flag of the Syrian rebels was raised over the country's embassy in Moscow, hours after reports that the deposed leader had fled to the Russian capital. So let's bring in Tim Marshall, who's a journalist, author, broadcaster who specialises in foreign affairs and international diplomacy. Hi there, Tim.
Hello.
You spent time inside Syria. Again, it's only really for people who've not engaged in this in the past. But I mean, the Syrian regime, I've been reading, is so brutal and so horrendous towards its own people. Give us some idea of just how bad Assad was.
Well, think of your worst nightmares and there you are. I mean, I was in Saddam's Iraq and it rivals that, and that was brutal. I remember going up to Sednaya prison. This is one of the ones that's got a couple of floors underground and the doors are locked and the rebels can't get in to see what's down there. And it was a chillingly frightening place. We went in and Jabhat al-Nusra prisoners were in there. This is now the IHT they turned into. And these guys shambled in, clearly frightened. And we were allowed to interview them, obviously, under those conditions. But I was just struck by this fear that they had. And you saw it in the street as well, with people not being willing to speak with you. People, and this was the same in Saddam's Iraq. If you were a foreigner and a journalist, just speaking to somebody could get you into trouble. And just saying one word out of turn, you would be tortured. Not just sort of called in for a chat or even just locked up, but tortured. And people lived in abject fear. And Assad used the different factions and the Kurds against the Druze against the Sunni against the Shia, etc., to divide and rule. The stories coming out, yes, I was not aware of some of the depth of the depravity, but it's not surprising. And it is actually cause for concern, because the people coming out, many of them will want revenge, and the people that don't come out, their families will want revenge. And so, which of course takes us to what's coming next and why it is such a fraught, difficult time to hold the place together.
Well, let's chew over that, shall we? Because what do you see as the main threats to stability? Are they going to be external, internal, or is everyone just going to be trying to pull whatever levers they can to be able to exert some kind of influence on whatever the next regime is?
I think mostly internal in the first instance. I hope, and there are potentialities, that this guy Mohammed al-Julani and other leaders of other factions, saw the lessons of what happened after Saddam fell in Iraq and the country fell apart, and saw what happened in Libya after Gaddafi and the country completely fell apart, and realize that it's in all their interests, even if they don't agree with each other, to have a genuine government of national unity. So that's the hope. And it's possible. But it is also possible that already, given that some of the Sunni militia have turned on the Kurds and are fighting the Kurdish militia, that you will see that replicated elsewhere. If they can't agree, they will quickly fall apart, fight each other, and shore up the regions that each individual sect controls, and that would be a disaster. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Either way, yeah, outside powers will still play. Turkey pretty much funded and armed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, the biggest of the groups. Iran will not take this lying down, though I think they are completely on the back foot. And Russia will try and do a deal to keep its bases there. We'll see if that works.
Obviously, Assad has fled to Russia, and there are many people saying that this is a deep embarrassment and a possible weakening of the Russian regime. I mean, what longer implications can you see this happening? Do you think it's going to affect things like what's happening in Ukraine, or is that just several years down the line?
You can't rule it out. I mean, because when you think someone is weak, that's the best time to test them. I mean, this happened to the Americans after they essentially, with us, ran away from Afghanistan. Russia then tested them in Ukraine. China tested them in Taiwan. And so it is possible that this will embolden some of Russia's enemies, but I think that that's less likely. I disagree with some analysis which says the biggest losers in this are Russia. I think the biggest losers in this by a long way is Iran. And that's because the Iranian corridor, which cuts right across the Middle East, from Tehran to Baghdad to Damascus to Beirut and the Mediterranean, and that was their supply line to Hezbollah. So not only have they seen Hezbollah completely smashed over the past year, they now are going to find it almost impossible to reinforce them and resupply them through the land route across the Middle East. Secondly, in Iraq, it's a lot of Shia militia that are partially allied with Iran, and they control large parts of Iraq, including Sunni areas, and the Sunnis there may decide this is the catalyst. So, the story is far from over, and it's a 360-degree impact that it's having.
And just a final quick question, just because I find it really interesting. We understand that Assad's wife, Asma, is in the UK at the moment. That's one report I've seen. I mean, does Britain have a part to play in what's happening and maybe using her in some capacity going forward, or at least restricting where she goes next?
I'll admit I wasn't aware of that. I thought the most likely thing was the UAE. There was a flight that left Saturday, Damascus to UAE. Okay, she may be here. I don't really think they can use it that much because, as you know, she was born here and speaks English and went to an English public school. But I suspect she'll be on her way to Moscow soon enough. Those days are done. Russia is utterly humiliated in all this. But you know why they had to let him in? They had to send a signal to the other dictators that they prop up. Push comes to shove, we'll at least give you a retirement home.
How interesting. Tim, great to speak to you. Thanks very much for your time. That's Tim Marshall, journalist, author and broadcaster and expert on the situation in Syria. Let's have a chat to Hussam Hammoud, a Syrian journalist and activist who fled Syria during the revolution in 2019. And he's based in Paris right now. Hi, Hussam.
Hey.
How are you feeling right now?
I think I like the question that you asked, what's coming next. But before answering it, before jumping to that question, we just need to flashback about what happened in Syria, because it was completely unexpected. What happened on the 27th of November and all of the offensive that happened back then, it was all unplanned for the people themselves. The people that were in the bottom of hopeless, that they were just seeing Assad normalizing with everyone now, and they think that the Syrian revolution is about to die, and then you have this big thing that it could just the fall of Assad regime. So
if it was completely unexpected, Hussam, what caused it?
The main thing is just we are talking about people who get the motivation of the revolution, of course, and people who have no other choice. Those people who revolt and they start those battles that are more than what's the Western media is describing right now, jihadists and Islamists and everything. They just people who fed up of dying. More than 150 civilians were killed in airstrikes and bombing of Assad regime, even without any war, any clear war, because like we are talking about frozen front lines for like the past 6 years before 27th of November of last November. So like for 6 years monthly, we were like at least having 150 civilians killed only by the bombing. So
Yeah.
at some point, that was the main reason of launching the whole battles. That it was called deterrence of the aggression, because there was an aggression by Assad regime, by Russian forces, and also by Iranian militia that they were in the country, including Hezbollah. They were bombing non-stoply. They were killing people, and they were using like side drones, just like target like hospitals.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you're talking about the horrors of being under the Syrian regime. What was it like for you and your family personally before you left?
That's also like take us to the main thing about Syria. Now, when we are just like standing to decide what's next, we are just like figuring out that we don't know what will happen next, because like we were being isolated for like more than 53 years of dictatorship. That was the living under Assad regime. People were just like caring about like how to eat, how to have a house to sleep in, and how to drink. We didn't even have had like that much of hopes. Most of us were just like studying at universities or something like this, just with one aim, leaving the country, just to have the minimum rights that a human being can have. Otherwise, you could live in that country, but like you will live on the minimum thing.
All right, Hassam, thank you very much indeed for your time. That was Hassam Hammoud, a Syrian journalist and activist.